obelisk are those long spear things, right? The Washington Monument's an obelisk,
Yeah,
right?
it's a
It's in the shape
pillar.
of an obelisk. And then
Yeah.
out in front of the Vatican is an obelisk.
Yes.
And then the dome shape from the Great Controversy, one of the great books, the dome shape on top of the Washington Capitol, as well as if you flip it over, the dome shape on top of the Vatican, right? They
Okay.
both have kind of that dome top.
Okay.
And but did you guys know that the Washington Monument and um the Washington Capitol and the Vatican were both designed after the Pantheon in Rome?
I wasn't aware it was after the Pantheon, but I was aware this is definitely Roman architecture. This I was aware of. Yes.
It was inspired by the Pantheon of Rome, but the Roman Pantheon also has an obelisk out in front of it. So there's an obelisk in front of the Pantheon in Rome, and there's an obelisk in front of the Vatican, and they're both from Egypt, which I think is interesting, right?
Yes.
Right? It's taking things back to Egypt. And I never went further back on Egypt stuff. So, and the Roman Pantheon was a temple, a pagan temple built and dedicated to all pagan gods. And then in 309 AD, the Catholic um, or the Pope at the time converted into a Christian church with all of the pagan statues and stuff on there that God says don't worship any idols, right? But anyways, so then if you go back to Egypt, where the obelisks were first built, the obelisks were built for sun worship. Do you guys know what an obelisk stands for?
Yeah,
The sundial?
A
well,
sundial, some people say it's like a beam, a ray of sunshine or a beam of sunshine. But when you get into some of the Egyptian gods, there's the story of Isis and Osiris and Horus and Set. Do you guys know that story at all?
yes.
No, not exactly, but yeah. But I've heard
Okay.
of them, but I don't know like how they
So
were related.
they're all part of like the Egyptian, like I think there's like the Heodology. Do you know what that's called, Zach?
Say that
Uh,
again.
Heodology or I don't know all the words. But anyways, there's like a kind of Egyptian pantheon of like 8 main gods, and in those there's Osiris, who was married to Isis, and
Mhm.
her brother, Isis's brother, and I'm not an expert on this, but Isis's brother Set wanted the kingship of Osiris, right? And Osiris, I believe, was like a human or a god. That Osiris, I don't fully understand the god versus human thing, but anyways, so Set killed Osiris. He like built a coffin. He built like a box that was exactly measured to his size and was like, "Hey, I want," and had like this big party for Osiris and all of his men, and was like, "Whoever can fit in this box wins something or gets a prize or like something." So everyone got in it, and then when Osiris got in it, he like shut it closed and threw it down the Nile River. And then Osiris died, and then Isis, his sister, came back and was sad and went and searched for Osiris, and then she brought him back and found him, and then Set found him, and then he cut him into 14 pieces and threw him back in the river. And then Isis and her sister went and recovered all of Osiris, except they couldn't find his genitalia, right?
Hmm.
So the obelisk was built in like honor of Osiris, right? So she brought him back, and kind of the mummification process was like she brought him back and put his body back together, all the pieces, but was missing the phallus, but was able through her magic to draw him back for one night and become pregnant with Horus. And then she had Horus and had to hide Horus from Set because Set wanted to take, her brother Set wanted to take the kingship of Osiris, and she hid him from him. And then over time, um, once he was bigger, he was able to come and fight Set and win his kingdom back. Horus was, right. So these are like the gods they worship. So this whole Isis thing. So Isis, here's the interesting thing about Isis. Isis continued to be worshipped in Greece and Rome, right? So Isis survived the whole Egyptian thing, and this dome and the obelisk which they come in harmony. So there's the dome and the obelisk at the Roman Pantheon. There's a dome and a bigger, so the dome gets bigger with the Vatican, and then the dome gets even bigger with the Washington Capitol, and the obelisk is giant with the Washington Capitol. The Washington Monument is enormous, right? So the dome and the obelisk keep getting bigger, but they go into this like this supernatural worship ritual, and the dome is supposed to symbolize the womb or belly of Isis, and the obelisk is supposed to symbolize Osiris, and it like points to the sun, and the sun comes in and stimulates it, and then they do these weird rituals, and anyways, there's saying that it's like how they called their pharaohs into existence. I don't know if I'm explaining this very well, but anyways, in the Washington, the Vatican, and the United States of America is kind of the political head, and the Vatican's kind of like a religious head, but they're both have, and the obelisk out in front of the Vatican, like even if they just had an obelisk because like, hey, we conquered Egypt, you know, we're a remnant of Rome and Greece and whatever conquered Egypt, and they have these obelisks. But the obelisk outside of the Vatican has a solar wheel around it, right? So it's not like it's just an obelisk for show. It has like a full-on solar wheel around it, which like, how can you deny that that's following the sun and sun worship? And it was actually positioned and thoughtfully laid out in reference to the sun. So, and the top of the Pantheon has like a big circle hole in it that allows sun to come into it. And I think it was even called like an eye, like, I don't know, and all the different things that pointed back to Isis somehow and her relationship with the sun and God and whatever. And the Washington Monument has a what is it, like a big like rectangle pool, like a reflecting pool outside of it, right? Which is supposed to be a sign to the gods above that they are worshiping them. But anyways, the point is like there's an obelisk, like it's just interesting to me that these obelisks are from ancient Egypt time when they were worshiping the sun, they were worshiping these different gods, they were worshiping all this stuff that was not God. It was like Egyptian worship that we're seeing in our modern day everyday world. And and I watched this one thing from this gentleman that pointed out that every time they call in a president, and the top of this Capitol building in the White House, they have like the picture of all the different gods and Washington up there with him, right? Surrounded by like 72 stars. But anyways, but there's nothing of Jesus. Like and even in our dollar, it says "In God We Trust" next to an Egyptian pyramid with a disconnected eye above it. Like, what God is it that all these things are worshiping? I don't think it's Jesus Christ. But I think that, you know, kind of just look past it. And then the other thing, and this may be too confusing to share with people in general, everything that I've said, I might need to clean it up. But the other thing is the what? Oh, Ellen White said in Signs of the Times that Satan is going to come back and impersonate Jesus Christ. And if you look into the occult world at all, throughout the occult world, I don't know what is coming in 2025, but 2025 is a very sought after, planned out year. 2025, like Alice A. Bailey, a lot of her writings point towards 2025. We have 2025 is when they're going to inaugurate the next president. Next year is an election year that's going to be interesting and weird. And the coming of Apollo, some people are saying that 2025 is when they are going to, you know, when Satan is going to come as Jesus, which Matthew 24 gives prophecy, right? And the interesting thing about Matthew 24 is that it's laid out in chronological order pretty well. And we're still kind of down in between, like, there will be wars and rumors of wars, and and there's quite a few things happen before Jesus says, when they say that Jesus is in the desert, or when they tell you that I'm here or I'm there, don't go, right? Because
Correct.
that means like Satan's coming as him, right? So people still need to be taken and given up, and that's happening in other countries, but it's not quite happening in the US yet. So I don't necessarily think that's going to happen by 2025, where Satan's going to come as Jesus yet, but something is coming in 2025. And I do think that there are rituals and worship systems in plain sight of the major systems around the world that are happening that we're completely oblivious to. And that is my point. I think there is an actual worship service that has been going on and continues to go on for a very long time when they inaugurate a president, with the obelisk and the dome, because the president gets inaugurated in the dome. And back in Egyptian times, when they would call pharaohs in, they would go through their rituals, and they believed that the pharaoh was actually like a god brought down in the flesh and a representative. And after Osiris died, Osiris became like the god of the underworld. And Isis is very much over, like, and the Egyptians believe very much in resurrection, and a lot of similar things to what Christians are looking for and hoping for. But this is why it's so important that there's a difference in false worship. Like, you can do very similar worship practices, and this is why it's so important to come to know God, come to really study Jesus Christ and know the difference between these things, because I believe that there's when they combined religion and politics, that is how Satan was able to murder Jesus Christ, his creator. And I think the time is coming again. There's been a separation of politics and religion, and this whole push for the New World Order, back to the Tower of Babel, this whole push of the New World Order is calling, I think, is just they won't say it, but I think is them trying to bring back church and state. So you can bring back fallen religion and fallen law and use them for a fallen system that was the same fallen system that was used to kill Jesus Christ. But only it's going to be used to persecute the people who are holding to a true character of Jesus.